Welcome to our very first AdminChat webinar interview, and we're absolutely delighted that our very first interviewee is the new CEO of IAAP, Dr. Veronica Cochran. Welcome, Veronica.
Thank you, Lucy. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me, and Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you too. I'm going to start just by asking you a little bit of background about you.
Okay.
So where were you born? What did your parents do? What was your start in your career life?
Okay, so I was actually born in Tennessee, but never raised there. So we moved very early from Tennessee. I was actually raised in Pennsylvania. I was raised in a little town called New Kensington. And I have two sisters and one brother. But mom was a single mom, and she worked really, really hard. But her role was she was an administrative secretary at the time. And she worked for an amazing organization known as the Redevelopment Authority, and she worked hard and wonderful. And so I watched her, to me, do the most miraculous things. And that was work 2 full-time jobs and managed to get me through college. That's phenomenal as a single mom. But we lived on the corner of 6th Street. And so there was a church to our left, about a stone's throw away, and there was a hospital, Notice Citizens General, stone's throw away to the right. And I spent equal amounts of time in both of those. I actually started playing in the lobby of the hospital. Back then, there was not HIPAA and all that stuff. And so a wonderful group of nurses began to take really good care of me. They would see after me. They'd bring me lunch. They would look for me. And then I spent all my summers and with the church at camp. And so the influence of both of those is really early in me. I wanted to be whatever those compassionate women were. And I had a huge respect for human potential that I believe I got from the church to my left. And so if you look at my history and my experience, I'm kind of a mixture of both of those worlds. I actually got degree plans in both of those early on. So raised by a great single mom, my siblings are incredible people, and I am married 30 years to a brilliant man, Alex, and have 2 wonderful children.
How did you therefore get into doing all this training stuff?
I think early on, Lucy, for me, what I knew was I wanted to do something that involved helping people realize their full potential. So even as a nurse, I had an incredible amount of compassion, but I also wanted to self-actualize. I wanted people to be their very best. So even as a nurse, I was in the precepting role. I was helping onboard new nurses. I was involved in orientation. And so it was, for me, kind of maybe a later kind of self-learning where I realized I had a real knack to teach. I had actually a knack to write and develop, and I really wanted to be a part of helping train people and develop them to their optimum. So that came much later, kind of a realization, and it made a really interesting path for me in healthcare, but also through healthcare and into what I currently do.
Yeah, so how long were you a nurse for?
Wow. So still a nurse, always a nurse, once a nurse, always a nurse. I have been in the field of nursing now, what would be over 30 years.
Oh my word. Okay.
Yeah. So you're kind of itching around my birthday. No, so nursing for me is probably my most natural place where I'm probably one-on-one with people seems to be just an incredible gift I have to make people feel comfortable and very much at ease. So one-on-one bedside nursing was a real privilege for me. And at the same time, I kind of walk in all those realms of compassion even now, but that's for me a very sacred spot. So, I really feel like that's kind of what I bring into my leadership role is a real respect for human beings and a compassion for them.
Absolutely. So how did you first come across administrators as a profession? I mean, I assume within the hospital, but, you all have a passion for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that happened to me early on in my career was I had my first boss in Texas was an incredible lady. And what happened is over time, she kept kind of going and moving in her career path. And I was still doing, helping onboard our new nurses in our hospital. And she came back and courted me to a corporate position as training manager. And in that position, that was kind of really eye-opening for me. Not only was it really attached to some skills I had that were natural for me, but it really allowed me to develop in some areas that I think I really, really utilize today. So I had a series of promotions, and over a 3 to 5 year period, I landed in an incredible vice president role with my first executive admin. And, no secret, I tell people all the time, Beverly was for me probably a lifeline. And she may, even to this day, not really know the valuable role she played for me as a young executive in really being successful at all. So Beverly could do anything. Beverly did everything, and she was competent. She was credible. She was incredibly valuable to me as a young executive. So when I walked with Beverly, I began going to kind of luncheons with the admins, and then they asked me to say a few words. And so I just kept growing in my desire to be a part of that profession, but also what I saw was really a deep place for me to go and really help people come to self-actualization. So I started going with Beverly to the luncheons. I started being asked to speak at them. And then from there, it just kind of grew because the more I played on this team, Lucy, for me, the more I realized I needed to, and I really wanted to play on this team.
Yes, I'm sure. But then you've got this suddenly amazing job with IAAP. Where did that come into play?
So for the last, I'll say 4 years plus, I walked with IAAP in a very significant partnership, really helping them develop some incredible initiatives and innovations around leadership development, around really accelerating the profession through different levels of education that would map very nicely to different career path levels. And so over time, those 4 years of developing Leadership Academy, we did things with Masterclass, EA Symposium, and for me, every time I would do anything in the way of development with IAAP, I would leave so incredibly inspired, but also so incredibly changed and charged that I knew I wanted to do more, and I just kept offering more and more of myself. And so when I found out there was an opportunity to play on probably what I would consider a larger scale and do things that I think the profession itself really needed, I thought, wow, I really wanted to help advance the cause, really promote the profession. So I decided to really put my hat in the ring and be a significant but also serious candidate for this particular position. And so here I am, what I would consider years later from what seemed to be the most natural progression of our relationship.
Very natural, actually. I mean, having seen you train and knowing how passionate you are about leadership, what do you think are the main leadership qualities that an assistant needs?
Oh, wow. For me, one of the things I think when you're thinking about leadership, and leadership is one of those things we see that's a foundational skill. It's unfortunate that when you look across, you cut the fabric of any corporation or business, typically development stays high in the hierarchy of position and title. And leadership itself, that skill set also stays pretty high in that. And so for me, when I think about the skills and the leaders of an admin, part of that has got to be around communication, effectively communicating. Because you could argue the best skill set any leader has is their ability to communicate, whether it's vision or passion or accountability. So I would say communication is going to be critical. I would also say the ability to very much innovate and use your imagination to really think way outside the box and really begin to think strategically. What I find is sometimes in roles like nursing and maybe even in the admin role, we tend to go tactical first. We almost think very tactically. So I would say one of the skills I think is important for leadership beyond communication is the ability to imagine, the ability to think strategically, to think holistically about processes, about the way departments work, about the work we perform on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. I think those skills are incredibly important. So beyond communication, beyond the opportunity to innovate, I would probably say, because we're in such a technology space, having a real technology expertise and acumen around how to use technology to improve the efficiency of your job, the efficiency of the organization, the efficiency of these groups that are meeting around the world and calling it team.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think, I guess those would be the top three that I think would herald the list.
You're obviously wanting to drive the IAAP into the future, and I know that all the associations right the way across the world are having problems recruiting new members and driving that bit forward. Do you have any kind of clear ideas as to how you're going to start to encourage maybe the new generation to get involved?
You know, what I love about the conversation we're in, and I'll bring a little context because I think as we're thinking about how to move the association, we also have to remember that beyond that, there is a larger scope of how do we affect the profession. Because you could argue it's the chicken and the egg conversation. The greater we
Absolutely.
influence the profession, the better the association will become because people see a real need for peer-to-peer collaboration, a real need for real-time problem solving with people who do the same work you do, a real need to find the best practices in order to stay really relevant in my chosen career path. So I think you could argue the work is as much in an association as it is really to figure out how to better move the needle of the profession. One of the things I know it's going to require is more collaboration. This work cannot be done in isolation, obviously. So it will require wonderful strategic partners with similar mission, vision, focus, emphasis, energy, if you would. So not only do we need great collaborators in this space, Lucy, we need coordinated efforts so that we're working in tandem. I think there's strength, obviously, and unity in this sense of community. So I would say what's going to be really important for us is coordinating our efforts beyond just what we can do so that we can have more of a magnificent impact overall. And the way I think I envision it, and we had this conversation even with our board of late, is we have to figure out how to be better contributors to the profession at large. So while yes, the maybe immediate focus is, gosh, how do we make sure we're serving our members well? The bigger question is, how do we make sure we're serving the profession up well in the ecosystem of business in such a way that every generation will see a real need to be involved with an association for relevance, continued understanding of what it takes to be at the top of my game in this particular profession and to find real collegiality with people who are like us.
Absolutely. Now, I know that's such a balancing act because you have members that have been members forever who absolutely love IAAP, but have also seen it go through a real period of change.
Absolutely.
And quite a difficult period of time. And I know we've talked about that. But then they want to hang on to some of the bits that were really amazing, but equally they do see the need to drive it forward.
Oh, absolutely.
That balancing act for you is going to be incredibly difficult, I would have thought.
Yeah. I think for me, there's always an opportunity to recreate history if we don't allow the future to come. So, anytime we're driving a car forward, yes, we can gain foresight from looking in the rearview mirrors and, but only to give us the knowledge we need to succeed in our tomorrow. So while there is a need to know what happened yesterday, the things that worked really well, the things that didn't work so well, while that can add to the context of how we move in the future, it can by no means become the future. So having said that, I think part of what the balance is about, Lucy, is really shifting paradigms. Because you could argue that while a lot of the work is to really kind of educate the ecosystem on the power of an admin, the incredible purpose of the role and all those things, and while that is part of the work, maybe some of the larger work really is in helping reframe the internal paradigm that we sometimes have for ourselves. I think you'd be surprised that most productivity is directly related more to paradigm than anything external.
Yes.
So having said that, the balance might be more internal workings and recreating some of those mental contextual frameworks that we see ourselves within in order to really move the ball forward. So while yes, it's a balance between past and future, it might be more of a balance between paradigm and practice and really seeing how well we can really begin to court our paradigm to actually allow the right future. One of the things I'm quite amazed by as I look at the media, and you and I have had a little conversation about this, and there is an incredible conversation afoot, right? And in the conversation, there is the focus, obviously, is on misconduct in the workplace. As it relates to sexual allegation, things of that nature. And the conversation within the conversation, Lucy, is about women and their role in the workplace. and their value in the workplace. And you could argue that that's an important conversation. Also, the context by which I think we're moving the ball forward. So yes, the association, yes, the members, and gosh, do we want to serve them well. But the conversation in the media really mandates that we really begin looking at the larger context of, gosh, how do we prepare women to lead in the workplace, to be taken serious in the workplace, to be perceived as valuable in the workplace, and how do we make sure our daughters, our nieces, our granddaughters are prepared for tomorrow as credible, competent, wonderful collaborators, right, with co-mission for organizations and really seen as partners.
Absolutely. And then at the same time, you've got this whole piece which is around the fact that, yes, it's a 98% female profession right now, which obviously is going to mean that we have to do that. But we also have some incredible males out there that are trying to get into the profession. And, you know, I think it's really interesting. You're not only the first female CEO of the IAAP, but you're also the first lady of colour.
Yes.
So,
right.
So it's a double whammy. And, you know, what do you think that's going to bring to the role?
You know, the one thing that is, without question, that lives in me as a paradigm that I think is a plus is I understand the value of diversity. And I understand the importance of leveraging the diversity across not just the membership, but also as we look in the profession. Part of that diversity is really men. So we have, you know, our first male on our board. We have, I mean, obviously when I went to your event, I had an opportunity to collaborate with some wonderful male administrators. So what we've come away with is certainly this is not women's work, but how do we make sure that we're making room for the diversity that surrounds this profession, right? It's not you know, where I am in my career path, not just to my education, not just to my age, but also how do we prepare ourselves to not just include, but also create specific education, discussion around males in this particular role. So I think you're absolutely right. While the context surrounds right now, the media is all about women, but there are valuable men in this space that if you're not careful will seem like an outlier. And they are not. Though they may be the minority, right? That doesn't mean, obviously, they're any less important to the work today or the work tomorrow. So as a woman of color, also a minority, I understand that. Yeah. Probably better than most.
Yeah, great point. So you're obviously presiding over a period of enormous change, not just for the association, but also globally, because we have World Summit coming up any minute. And obviously that is all about the way that the profession is going to move forward. And I know IAAP and Dawn Becker, who is currently your chair, particularly have been playing a huge part in that. Yes. How do you see those changes coming about?
So I had an opportunity at your event to meet F. Lloyd, who I think is phenomenal, and to listen to not just the work she's done, but the vision she has. So what I think the powerful thing about leaders, if we really understand the context correct, leaders' primary responsibility is to create the phenomenon called leadership. So that being said, there's no way to move that world dial without leadership, the collective corporate efforts. So I envision, again, that we're talking about making massive contributions to the profession as a you know, maybe collegiate associations, right? So if all of us can begin working in tandem, I feel like the world work should be everybody's work. I feel like we should be trying to figure out how to be contributors on a global scale. And then as we begin to really, I guess, unite in our efforts, that's where I see the global change happening. Honestly, there's no way to do local change without thinking globally. And there's no way to do global change without thinking locally. And so that being said, we all have an opportunity to play a role in how we advance the work, whether it's professional image, professional conduct, professional practice, professional development. All of those are parts of how we move the dial. But I think our collective efforts, us being a part of World Summit, us figuring out how do we get our arms around creating what is incredibly needed research, white papers, where we're actually coming to the table with data, context. We're talking about not just the history, but what the future will mandate for these professionals. And I think we've got to get in the writing space. We have to get in the context to have those white papers written. And I think the World Summit for us really provides kind of that global perspective. And it allows us to all play on the same team, regardless of association, regardless of individual missions. The larger mission must be the global work.
Absolutely. And career progression, to me, it is just the number one reason why the profession isn't taken seriously, because there is no clear career progression.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, one of the things we are tasked with is really trying to kind of create, if you would, a career path. So that people can identify where they are in the scheme of things and then know how best to develop maybe to their next level, depending on what they aspire to do with their career, where they aspire to go. So part of our role in that is to really help people see the natural progression of the profession and figure out what's really necessary to shift to the next level. What levels of development, what kind of education or certification is needed to really, move the dial. So I think, to your point, part of our work really has to be about creating some sort of visual aid, some sort of identifier that shows people, here's the natural progression of what this career path looks like, so that I can find myself in it, Lucy. I can identify where I am and have a real sense of how to map out where I really legitimately want to go. And I think that's part of our work, absolutely.
And your certification, CAP, is changing this year quite significantly, isn't it?
Certification is kind of that standard-bearing piece that says to the world, gosh, am I serious and committed to my excellence, to my relevance in my sphere? And so for me, that level of standardization is the beginning. It's kind of where everybody, in my mind, we're all looking to figure out how to play on our best level, how to be the most excellent professional in our sphere. And I really do believe certification is a part of that. I actually believe it's fundamental and foundational. And then how you progress beyond that, gosh, there's so many sub-certifications. There's so many different opportunities. But I think we have to begin prioritizing our own development. And so often, if we're not careful, we're waiting for somebody to deem us worthy, right? We're waiting for someone to determine I'm worth the education, I'm valuable enough to spend the resource. And what I have come to find out is no one will value us more than we value ourselves. And so taking the initiative, if you would, to prioritize our own development is going to be critical. So whether that's certification, whether that's, different educational pieces, whether that's leadership development, like all of that should be a non-negotiable for anybody in this profession.
I agree totally. The other thing, of course, with the profession that is getting a lot of press at the moment is AI, artificial intelligence, and how that's going to affect the profession. Because obviously, a lot of these big technology companies are calling the technology they're putting out there assistants. What do you think? How do you think that's going to affect the profession?
One of the things I think is critical, Lucy, is that we keep really initiating and staying ahead of the change so that, we're not letting people mandate what the profession looks like. We're actually owning it and we're driving the profession forward. So being in the driver's seat of our profession is critical. So we have to evolve, though, and you could argue that anything that doesn't change dies. So while there's an opportunity to really use any type of artificial intelligence to create greater efficiencies, who doesn't want to have more efficient process or more effective processes? I don't think when you talk about engagement, and engagement is a huge, it's a huge deal on a global level. When people come to work, we find there's real engagement issues, and so that affects obviously profitability, productivity, all those things. So I don't think artificial intelligence is in a place to retire personal touch engagement, the opportunity to play team. But I do think if we can find better ways to do the work we're doing that will make that work easier, make it take less time. Time is money. So if it's about saving money, if it's about creating new budgets and new resources for other things like development, because we can shave down time, which saves us money, I say I'm all for that. What I had an opportunity to do was sit in on a demo, and I was blown away, Lucy, at what is possible. And I think if we use it in complement to the work we're being asked to do, which everybody knows that work grows. I mean, it just keeps growing. So not only do I believe self-management is mandated, so leadership development is a part of how I learn to manage me. I think the other part of that is best practices and other types of technology, be it calendar reminders, are critical add-ons that help me better manage me. So while I think the answer is yes and yes, if I can find a way to use it to be better at what I do, to be more efficient and effective at what I do, that's great. But I don't think we're in a position where we can really afford to lose the touch point with people, to stay wonderfully engaged with people, to create wonderful collaborations. And that takes face-to-face, it takes engagement, it takes interaction, it takes time. And so I would love to see us use artificial intelligence to help create opportunities to drive engagement, because we have more time for that. Absolutely.
I think if we look at the role of assistant, there are varying different types, and obviously we talked about different levels. But I'd like to talk to you for a minute about classification, because obviously if you have somebody who is doing purely administration, that's a very different role to somebody who is at the opposite end of the scale doing executive assisting and is far more of a strategic business partner. And yet in the way that it's classified in the United States as a role, the two are lumped in together. Is that something that you see IAAP helping to drive a change in?
So for me, not only is that a work for our association to really be thinking about what the role looks like, what the different classifications are, what the salary is attached to those, what the expectation of work related to those. That I really do believe on a large scale, Lucy, is part of the world work. It's how do we make sure there's equity and there's clarity that those are similar. So if we're talking about one position, no matter where we are, we're comparing an orange to an orange, right? An apple to an apple. So I think that's critical as we really talk about the equity of the classification, so that we're talking about the same thing. So when we're tying dollar amounts to it, we know exactly what we're getting for that particular dollar amount. So while I do think that's part of our work, that is for us, especially because there's so many variations, right? And sometimes you're called the same thing and yet you're not doing the same thing. And so part of the work around classification and having a sense of what that duty looks like at those different classifications is critical if we're going to move the profession forward. And maybe it's about maybe the recognition of several classifications, you know, and those we have a sense of what that duty of responsibility looks like, what those skills are that are required, those abilities for that particular classification, and then what is the money that's attached to that particular classification, because that's also part of the conversation. So while, yes, that is a big work, I think that's part of our work, but every association's work is to create wonderful clarity around that. And I think that's probably on a world scale, that is an important part of what I believe is the coalition of associations work. In the meantime, what I think is difficult is if we don't have a sense of what we're doing based on what we were hired to do. So for instance, one of the things I encourage people to do is not just have a sense of what your skills are, but keep that totally updated so that what you're doing, you can actually speak to and you can begin mapping an ROI back to that particular skill or ability. So you need to create your own evaluation systems if there are none, or your own feedback mechanisms so that you're constantly updating your CV, resume with these skills, but you have a sense of how those skills actually affect the organization, how they save money. Whether or not we're doing improvement work, whether we're doing, you know, process improvement work, we're saving the organization money or maybe making the organization money. So we have to have a sense of what my job entails. And that means we have to pay closer attention to the things we're actually doing and begin to really chronicle those and attach ROI to some of that. And that, for me, is part of the base conversation of the conversation we need to leverage around classification. If I don't currently have a sense of the duties I'm being asked to do, the weight of those duties to the organization's bottom line, those new responsibilities, those new tasks, those new abilities, my new skills, and how they're saving money, creating new efficiencies, then that's going to be harder for us to leverage on a global scale because we don't have a real sense of what the expectation is surrounding the current role I'm in.
Yeah. Gosh. Okay.
Does that make sense?
It really does make sense. I have to say, I'm finding this whole conversation so inspiring, but what inspires you?
So to be totally honest, I am inspired by this work. And I was inspired before, but once I became full-time November 1, I went to headquarters and I spent some time with staff individually and, of course, as a team of amazing individuals. I spent time with the board. But the thing that for me hit me like a ton of bricks, Lucy, on my way home from my first visit was I felt an incredible sense of obligation. There's been tremendous sacrifice on behalf of board members, on behalf of the members, on behalf, obviously, of staff, people long before I came along. So we're talking about historical people. Obviously, the F. Lloyds of the world, the Lucy Brazers, you know, the Melba Duncans. I mean, and so you sit there, and my thought is, what a profound responsibility. And it shifted to maybe almost a burden or an obligation, a duty beyond my role, right? Obviously, to make sure that I've created a future better by being a part of the association, so that well after my tenure, we actually did work that would remain. So I found myself being inspired by the obligation, being inspired by the duty, being inspired by the necessity. And every time I have a class, every time I teach, facilitate anything, and with IAAP, any of those administrative professionals, I leave having drunk the Kool-Aid. And for me, I've never felt more needed by a profession, because one thing they don't do, they don't take much for granted. Yeah. And they are hungry for development, affirmation, appreciation, recognition, all of those things. And that inspires me. I'm inspired by people who don't just want, obviously, something just for themselves, but are inspired by a greater mission. Mm. And I think I told somebody, like, I'm old enough now, and I'll say that gingerly because I've just had a birthday, but I'm old enough now to know where I want to work and the work I want to do and the role I want to play. And I'm very intentional and deliberate. I'm not young and zealous. I'm old and seasoned. I have a real sense of discipline, but I have a sense of intentionality and deliberateness around this work and every work I take on. And for me, that's my inspiration is I want to be involved with creating a future that we all can be proud of. Well after I'm gone, that history will bear that I was the right person at the right time for the right work, and I just added my brick on another man's brick. And so I'm inspired by mission. I'm inspired by people, and IAAP and the profession at large inspires me.
Wonderful. Let's do a couple of just quick fire personal things, okay? So
okay.
I know you're married to
Alex.
For
Alex
30 years.
30 years. Wow. Alex is an honorary IAAP member. He goes probably to every function with me, and I tell them all the time, use him, because he loves the membership, he loves the people, he loves the staff. He is my best friend. He believes I can hang the moon. And so he is a 30-year blessing.
And you probably can hang the moon, I'm sure. Children, how many children?
I have 2. My daughter Alexis is 28. My son Ian is 25. Alexis actually works for us full time, but she's got a biology degree and a fashion design degree, if you can imagine how those marry in her. She's brilliant and beautiful. My son has recently joined the cast of Hamilton. So wow. If that tells you anything about his skill set and competency, he is a phenomenal performer, entertainer. He's a singer, dancer, actor extraordinaire. And we could not be prouder of our children, not just for what they're doing, but the kind of people that they are. They're wonderfully thoughtful human beings.
What's your favorite author?
Gosh, my favorite author. So I'm kind of a leadership buff. So I enjoy reading probably all of the leadership greats, the Maxwells of the world. I like to hear what people are saying in that regard. So I'd probably say most of the leadership gurus. I maybe tend to read a little bit of that, but I don't even know that I probably have a favorite. I am in the process of writing. And so what I do to make sure that my stream is pretty pure is I try not to read anybody's anything. I don't know if that happens to you, but when I go to write, I want the purity of my own stream to come out. So I probably stay really clear of reading things that would influence my own vocabulary, my ability to say what I really want to say. And so I do read leadership things. I read everything administrative professional. I read your things. I read those things. But for me, in the writing space I'm in this year, I'm trying to stay very deliberate in being kind of clean in my own lane.
Okay. And then what about your favorite movie and the kind of music you listen to?
So I love all kind of music, and I will just tell you, I am a dancer extraordinaire.
I've seen it.
I love to dance, but I love music. I love classical music. I love country music. I love R&B. I love gospel. I love music. I love music because of how it makes me feel. Music seems to touch me in a way that's that I don't know that much else does. So it's invigorating to me. It's like drinking a cold glass of water. Music just kind of, like even it's funny because I went to speak at an event and they asked me for a theme song. And so I was trying to think of a song, but I ended up just coming out to a song that just allows us each to be beautiful in our own spirit and space. But the sound of the music really set the tone for my talk, and I had no idea how much it would promote what I wanted to say. So I love all music. I love to dance. As far as, what else did you ask me besides my music?
Movies. What's your favorite movie?
Gosh, my favorite movie. I watch everything. Believe it or not, I watch scary movies. I know that sounds terrible. My favorite movie would probably be, and I'm struggling with the title of the movie, but it's a love story. And The Notebook?
Yes.
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 I was like, where is the title? I loved that movie for all the right reasons. I think memories are powerful. I think love is endless, timeless, limitless, eternal. So it'd be maybe that movie for me. I like documentaries a lot. I like historical movies, but I love love. And so it'd probably be The Notebook.
Excellent. Okay, and my very final question. If you were going to give a brand new assistant a piece of advice, what would you give them?
Oh, that's easy. The advice I would give a brand new administrative assistant would be to believe in yourself. I think one of the things that is obvious to me is that they are extraordinary individuals with extraordinary talent, gifting, strength, ability, and often they're the last person to see it or believe it. And what I found is it's difficult to outperform your own paradigm. No matter how many people are telling you you're wonderful, if you don't believe you're wonderful, it's very difficult to perform out of a lens you don't have. So I would say, gosh, believe in yourself and make development a non-negotiable. And so don't wait on people to tell you you're worthy of it. Go find it, go figure it out, prioritize it, because I believe self-actualization is not optional. I think people need to be optimized. And when we don't know what's wrong with us and we're feeling kind of out of it or unappreciated or stuck or stagnant or frustrated, typically it's somewhere because we're not self-actualized. We realize there's more to us and we just don't know how to get it out. So I would say believe in yourself, and by all means, in that belief, you are worth that development to become the best version of yourself possible, and don't retire early. And what I mean by that is don't stop growing prematurely.
Dr. Veronica Cochran, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Lucy.